So, the really, really good news. And of course, we've just talked about what's actually happening now and what we need to be seeing and what we need to be discerning and perhaps be understanding a little bit better as we go into this new time, this new era, this new moment. So the really, really good news, as I said, I was stood at the television, I'd just turned it off and I said, Lord, where's the good news? Where's the positive reports? And that's where I believe that I heard something similar to, son, that's why I gave it to the shepherds. That's why I gave the good news to the shepherds. And I to be honest, I don't think I was expecting an immediate response. It was a frustration that I was feeling, but that is what I sensed came into my heart and into my mind. And that got me thinking about the shepherds at the time of Jesus' birth. And really the shepherds were normal people, hard-working, normal people, going out every day, the people that understood that if there was going to be a future, then they would have to work hard, and they'd have to look after the sheep. And that was probably no interesting, wonderful enthusiasm. I don't know how they saw that. But in terms of jobs, it may not have been the job that's up here. It was just a normal, run-of-the-day, run-of-the-mill type job. But they were hard-working people. They were people who understood that future comes from working hard and giving all that you've got right now. And they were people who were looking after the sheep, looking after the lambs. Those who were unable to look after themselves, that's sheep and lambs. They were able to look after themselves, that's who they were looking after. Those who so easily could be led like lambs to the slaughter. Those who could easily go astray. Those who could be hurt and wander off in places out of bounds. Shepherds were prominent in the Bible. Joseph, he looked after a few sheep in the desert, you remember that. And David looked after his father's sheep. And there were numbers of others who were shepherds in the fields. And I began to think about that. So he's given the good news into the hands of the shepherds. And I thought, what he means is he's put good news into the hands of people who care. The hands of people who look after others around them. Not professionals, not paid up professionals. No, just normal people like you who love and care for other people. Who consider other people. Who don't demand remuneration or have an expectation of that. They are the ones who reach out and do whatever is necessary to keep the vulnerable safe. They feed the needy. They watch over the oppressed. They find themselves in houses, kneeling and worshipping at the feet of Jesus. And I believe that real shepherds are all over. And I also believe that houses are going to feature prominently again where we are going. That this sense of a house where shepherds come and where Jesus is, fellowship and care and concern, that something again is going to happen in houses. And of course, part of the restoration movement that happened here years ago started in houses. It swept through houses. And I believe that we might see something similar to that again. And of course, as I began to think about the first advent of Jesus, I began to think about the second advent. And as we go through this time, I'll share more about what I mean. But the first advent of Christ was the birth of Jesus into the earth. It was his life and his death as well as the resurrection. But it was the story of man walking into the fullness of God. Of course, when he was 30, he had 3.5 years of absolute fullness of seeing the things of God in a incredibly extraordinary way. The second advent will not be this time of his reappearing. Now, in classical theology, what we believe is that Jesus is going to appear in the clouds at the trumpet call, and we are either going to meet him in the clouds or something momentous is going to happen. That's the second advent of Jesus. But I actually believe that we are entering an era where the revelation of his glory and the revelation of his coming is going to be made known, but not in the way that we are thinking it's going to be made known. I believe that we're going to enter into a time where there's going to be a non-stop unfolding of the glory of his majesty into the face of the earth, where the knowledge of God will increase in ways that have never been seen before. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But anyway, houses. I began to see houses full of sheep and humble shepherds taking care of them. I could hear the simple words of compassion and care, and the words of good news that they shared with those around them. The real shepherds are going to begin to take the place like never before. This time has caused and is causing something to come forth in people's hearts that perhaps some people didn't even know was there. The rented ones, the rented shepherds, they're going to fall away. They're going to fall into the background. Because there's been some who have been masquerading as real, but they were just rented boys, rental boys. Just as in the account of Judges. And if you have not read that, you should read that account. Because basically, in that account, they could be bought. As long as you gave them a new suit, a little bit more money, as long as there was the promise of something more, they would move from place to place. Well, those are what I call the rental boys. The real shepherds are going to be brought to life. They're going to be brought to a new place. We're going to see them again. And there's going to be the mentality that has been, the slave mentality, is going to disappear. And there's going to be this mentality of sons and daughters again. Real family, real community. It's going to be raised up again. It's going to be beautiful. Relatives and neighbours will hear undeniable testimony. This is what he says in Luke 1 and verse 58. It says, when her neighbours and relatives heard how the Lord had shown great mercy to her, they rejoiced with her. The neighbours, the relatives, they were all hearing it. As the shepherds went out, they were hearing it everywhere. God put good news into their hands. And just think about this as well. When the shepherds and the wise men got to the barn to see the child, full provision came forth. Not only for that moment, but for years to come. Gold, incense, myrrh. This was provision for the life and the ministry of Jesus going into the years to come. That is all going to happen again. The spiritual, I want to talk about the spiritual. I believe that we're on the brink of instead of religiousness, there's a hunger for spiritual things. And you could say that the Western world, after many years of searching and many fighting for alternative ways of doing things and thinking about things, we're coming into a new era of spiritual. The holistic approach to medicine, that's going to increase. Astronomy even, things of astronomy, things that have been sneered at. I think even that is going to open up new avenues to spiritual. Quantum physics is going to bring new thought into science. It already is doing. Huge new frontiers in technological breakthroughs are going to happen. Alternative energy sources are coming. Different ways of transportation. Do you know the things that you've watched on Star Trek? Those very things, we are going to see the beginning, and perhaps within a short space of time, we're actually going to see some of these things beginning to happen. The frontier of space, we're going to see breakthroughs there as never before. I believe we've already started seeing that. The revolution in warfare, because that is all going to change. And the list goes on and on. All these things will become much more fashionable. They'll become prevalent. The spiritual and supernatural dimension of things that has been explored in the Eastern world for generation, mysticism, that will be awakened in a whole new way again. It's nothing new in the Eastern world, and it's not even seen as unusual. Dreams and visions, supernatural things, they're not seen as unusual. It's only in the Western world where those things have been seen unusual, but they are going to open up again in whole new ways. They're going to be embraced, new spiritual dimensions of life. The mind and academic prowess, that will be still formidable, and there'll be a great deal of weight into that. But there will be an opening to new light, an enlightenment, a gradual reawakening to alternatives, a spiritual approach toward life. There's also going to be a hawkish and an aggressive mentality toward law and order. Because, of course, what's happening now, and we've got to understand this, what's happening now, of course, we may well feel that, yes, things have got to change. There's got to be new expression. There's got to be a respect, and there's got to be an honour of everyone across the board. Of course, that is true. But that cannot happen at the expense of law and order. And those who have been in the old system that want law and order, if this is not balanced properly, if this new moment is not balanced properly, they will come in heavily and aggressively to bring law and order. Now, I've got to say, and many people, and again, you've got to look at it, but many people have spoken harshly of President Trump. And of course, he's twittered and he's tweeted and he said all sorts of things that we would go, what in all the world is he doing? Perhaps that's not a good idea. But on the other hand, there are many things that he said that he's not done, and many things that he's done that have been good. And again, we have to look and go, why does the media never say anything good about him? Why? You see, I always go the other side of the equation as well to see what's going on. But law and order, of course, if there's a sense that that is lost, then anything that is gained in terms of enlightenment and insightfulness, that will also be crushed by a very heavy hand. So we've got to understand that you can't change one system. You can't bring a new system in if the new system does not hold some of the values of the old system. And yes, the old system may be corrupt, it may be bad, and we may all go, it's been controlling and manipulating and it's been harsh. We may all say, yes, that is true, but you cannot change the old system by bringing in a new system that seems to have anarchy and lawlessness and rebellion coming from it. It's an impossibility. These things we have to begin to think about. Anyway, as I was thinking about what is going on this Advent, the first Advent of Jesus and now the second Advent of Jesus, where are we? We're on the verge of the second Advent of Christ coming back whatever that means. But, of course, before the New Testament began, there was 400 years of desert experience. And John the Baptist broke into that desert experience and pulled down something of heaven. And Jesus, of course, came in with a new covenant. Well, it was very quiet before any of that started. There were no visions, there were no dreams. We don't hear of any prophets. We don't hear 400 years, it's quiet. And then suddenly, there's this awakening of prophetic voices. There's this movement of people who are moved by the Spirit of God. There's dreams and visions, and it just happens in incredible, quick success. And it doesn't stop happening the whole time, straight all the way into Acts and beyond that. So the first advent, let me just say this again, had to do with the advent, the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus as a man into the world. God man, but nonetheless man. And over the centuries, we've been finding out about man, what man is really like. Coming to terms with anthropos, that is the humankind, human being. We've been seeing what we are like. And the church is only just finding out about how God created man in his own image. You know, we've talked a lot about sin, but you were created in the image of God. You were created beautiful. Everything is beautiful. In God's eyes, you were created beautiful. God doesn't see sin because Jesus dealt with sin. Of course, he sees everything that's going on, but he's already dealt. He's already got the solution to it all. But it's been about how God views man, his love and his delight in man, and how God has saved man, but also wants to transform him into the same image of Jesus. That's what this time's been about. That's what we're meant to have been doing with this time. That's the will of God, that we might become the image of Jesus, that we might begin to be more and more like Jesus. That's what we're meant to do with this time. And slowly we're becoming aware that the gospel of the kingdom of God, as well as the gospel of salvation, is that which we need to see across the face of the earth. In other words, transformation across the face of the earth, as well as salvation. Jesus, of course, from the age of 0 to 30, was becoming conscious of who he really was. He was understanding more and more who he really was, what place he had, what he was going to do, where he was going to do it, how he was going to do it. He was certain of some things by the time that he was 30 years old. And for those 3.5 years, he was man empowered and filled with God, totally. Finding his fullness and his oneness, and becoming the spiritual being that he was always destined to be. Through death into resurrection life. That's what we've meant to be learning all these years. He exemplified the way to becoming the real spiritual being that we are created to become. That's what he did. Now, the second advent, I'm saying that where I believe we are is the beginning of the second advent of Jesus Christ. In other words, and I said this, that it's not Jesus coming in the clouds with a trumpet call. I don't believe that is going to happen right now. I may be wrong, and if I am, we're in for a beautiful surprise. But what I believe is that we are about to see a release of the glory of God on the earth like never before. It's the beginning of an era of revelation of Jesus Christ, of the Christ. But it's an entrance of a spiritual dimension of life filled with resurrection power and a life from above and beyond. A release of the glory of God like never before. And it's going to involve many reappearances and visitations and a release of supernatural power that we've never experienced before. And this is what I want to say about it. I believe it's going to be a time when scientists find themselves confronted by the actual truth of God. Those who work in physics, in the sciences, in numbers, in geography, many will find the reality of God himself as their work comes to meet him. And many are going to do this whilst they're trying to disprove his very existence. Those who work in sight, who work in sound, they're going to see and they're going to hear. I believe that's the time that's the edge of where we're on right now. And I also believe that those who are going to have the greatest adventures are those people that have trained themselves for this moment, those people who have been discipled, those people who have become accountable, those people who have become transparent, those people who have become vulnerable, those people who share their life and who walk in discipleship, who have truly wanted to be like Jesus in terms of the way that he was in his vulnerability. You see, his power, his might, his majesty all came from that place. Naked God, that's where they came from. That's where all his power and authority was wrapped up. And of course, a true disciple knows that as they are vulnerable, as they share, as they are speaking in transparency, as they're being honest and open, that God lives there. So those who are going to have the greatest adventures in the time to come are those people that have learned as disciples and who have learned through that not only servanthood, not only serving, but have come through that into a place of sons and fathers, of daughters of mothers, of that kind of intimacy, and who are trained and equipped to move in the Spirit. They've learnt from the Word and they're beginning to move and use all the tools of the Spirit. In fact, this is what I said. For them it will be spiritual gifts which are not singular gifts or tools being used at separate times, but rather a flow of gift coupled into an established life, a solid life, but which is a liquid gold flow running through the whole of the being. This life will automatically enfold and draw into it all that is available. It'll be a spirit life encapsulated and marinated within the fabric of the temple, but flowing in a continuous flow out into the life of the world. That's what it's going to look like. It's just going to happen. People are going to find themselves just moved in the Spirit. It's beautiful. For many, it will not seem to be a spiritual experience, but rather a natural experience with a constant and consistent flow of supernatural abilities. Gifts and abilities flow together as one and pour out into a particular or specific job or task, a calling or a function, whatever the person, whatever sphere they're involved in and whatever they're called to, it's just going to flow like that. It's going to be beautiful. And of course that doesn't hinder anyone or everyone from taking part. And there will be people who are captured and flowing in this life who actually, like the blind man that Jesus healed, didn't actually realise it was Jesus that healed them. He didn't know until afterwards. who had touched him, who had moved him, what had happened to him. He didn't know who had done it to him. Well, I believe people are going to get caught up in that as well. People are not going to know. They're just going to feel the life and they're going to flow into it. It's going to be a super exciting time. I really believe it. But we've got to navigate through this present time and we've got to be alert and aware. Now, as I was thinking about this whole thing and looking at shepherds and the home and seeing this revelation of the glory of God come into the earth in so many spectacular ways, I began to think about Dr. Luke. Luke, who wrote that gospel, was a doctor. And I began to think about the medical and health practitioners all over the world. And you know, they've received great encouragement. I mean, here, we were on the verge of making the NHS into God. And thankfully, we've held ourselves from that and we've said we're grateful. We are so blessed and so thankful. And I often say down at the medical centre with all those that I know, how blessed we are and how grateful and thankful we are for all that we've got. But God's God and healing comes from God through whoever in the end. So the NHS, which is a wonderful institution, it's a fabulous thing that we have. Many other people and places in the world have nothing like it. So we should be grateful. But many have received encouragement. And I believe in the time to come, a number are going to receive rebuke. Because for whatever reasons, the truth presently, and some of the things that people are feeling, they're not actually saying it. They haven't felt able to be released to say it, but I believe that we're on the verge of a change right now. And I think that more practitioners and more health, those who are involved in health, are going to actually begin to say what they really feel about what has happened and where we are presently. And of course, although we've just heard one particular way that has been told us, there are hundreds and thousands of other people that believe differently to the one way that we've been told. But I think that there will have been encouragement and there may well be rebuke to come. But I began to think about Luke, and this is what it says about him. He says in the beginning of Luke, chapter 1, 1-3, it says, "Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account, that you may know with certainty of those things in which you were instructed." And I felt like the Lord was saying to me, you know, there's going to be some medical people, there's going to be health practitioners who actually coming out of this time will have a new sense of, I must be true to what I have seen, what I have heard, what I have read, the facts that have come before me, and actually that I need to report on those facts and the things that I've seen. And when we get to that place, it's going to be incredibly helpful because we need the voices of our medical practitioners. We need that. We don't just need one voice. We don't just need someone who thinks they're an expert. We don't just need one scientist. We need a body of people that are willing to speak the truth, to bring the truth accurately and orderly and with the facts. That's what we need. And that's what we've needed in this time. And I believe that we're going to see that coming towards us in the time to come. There's going to be more people writing orderly, factual, and real accounts to help us to see what God is doing. And I say, let it roll on. Lord, we need that. I believe there's going to be visions, such as Zacharias received. We know that. There'll be dreams, such as Joseph received. There's going to be celestial and angelic visitations. There's going to be sightings. There's going to be observations. There's going to be that kind of phenomena in increasing measure, just as Gabriel visited Zacharias and Mary. And of course, there's been all these things happening in the Eastern world, but it's just like there needs to be this lid that's lifted in the Western psyche, and perhaps this has forced the lid to be lifted. Because the lid's been on the pan, we've been like a pressure cooker, but the pressure is lifting the lid. And when it does, there's going to be a moment where people begin to be open for that which is spiritual. And that'll be beautiful. I believe as well that in some places the normal and mundane will be turned into moments of marvel and astonishment at the consequences of things which will be made plain when there are moments of exposure and disclosure that are going to come. These things are going to come, and suddenly there's going to be wake-up moments. There's going to be astonishment. There's going to be marvel and an awakening like we've never seen before. And many people, of course, who have waited for the miraculous in terms of health, and I do believe that there's going to be an outpouring of miraculous things in terms of health, but also in wealth and in the thinking of the future. We're going to have breakthroughs, and these are going to happen in many various and different ways. Sometimes supernatural, other times natural, but in ways beyond what is now possible. There's going to be things that happen that we did not believe we were going to see, but in the next 5 years we are going to see miraculous cures coming in the medical world. We're going to see it. You're going to know it. There's going to be things that happen that are going to be astonishing to us. And that's going to be beautiful, as well as not a little scary. Because of course with all these things there is great risk as well. But the womb of God, I began to think about the womb of God. Just as the womb of Mary experienced a conception that was beyond human endeavour and creation, there will be the purposes of God which have been hidden in the depth of his being, which will be searched out by the desire of men and women, of course, of humankind, but they'll be revealed by the Spirit of God in the hearts and minds who are desperate enough for it. There's going to be revelation beyond what we've ever seen before. Throughout the sciences, throughout the technology, it's going to be incredible. If we thought it was going quick at the moment, hang on to your seats. Hang on to your seats. And these purposes and plans have always been in him. It's a little bit like this thing about the law of gravity. Well, gravity, of course, is miraculous. It's incredible. But gravity has always been in God. It's always been there. All that we did was discover the law of gravity. And we called it the law of gravity, and everyone went, it's a miracle. Yeah, but it's always been there. And you understand what I'm saying? That actually there are things that are in God that have always been there, that are part of his very nature, that what we're going to do is we're going to tap into those very things and we're going to make those discoveries, and suddenly we're going to see miraculous things released like we've never seen them before. Fantastic, huh? For with God nothing will be impossible. The power of the Word in all its forms, the power of light, of sound, of motion, and of water in various forms are going to be revealed in the days to come. The glory of God, the knowledge of God, like the sea. It's going to just carry on and carry on. Thrones will fall. This is what I believe Mary said, or Elizabeth said in Luke 1 and verse 51 to 52. It says, he has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down their thrones and exalted the lowly. Of course, as we go forward, wisdom is needed. People of wisdom are needed at this hour, because knowledge will increase. Know-how will increase, insight will increase, enlightenment will increase, awakening is going to happen. But the one thing that we are going to need is the wisdom of God to know how to release these things, to know how to bring them in without causing more hurt, more pain, more oppression. Wisdom. Of course, we're going to have to continue to have moral and ethical standards. We can't just begin to wipe those away. And the people of God need to begin to think about life. And we need to be pro-life. You understand me? We need to be pro-family, community. We're the ones that encapsulate this. And we need to let other people know that these are things that God delights in and that we delight in. And we're not going to easily let these things go. And yes, there can be other thoughts. Yes, there can be other things that we can be open to and respectful to hear. But we are not going to let go of the values that we have in God. Because the future is built on those values. Many who have been in places of influence and authority will be removed. Many are going to lose the platform. There'll be closures of the old system. Platforms that used to be, and platforms that used to be huge, they're going to be closed down. And of course, you remember the story of Zacharias. God came along. He brought his answer. He brought his solution. But Zacharias couldn't believe, and God went, "Hey, I'm going to zip you up. I'm going to zip you up, and I'm going to take your platform from you, and you won't speak any longer." Of course, God's he's very gracious. He's full of grace. And everybody, when he came outside, everybody went, "Oh, he's seen a vision. He's been in the presence of God," and surely he had. But God had shut him up. God had taken away his platform. That is going to happen to many people in the coming days. Those that are humble will ask for help from people who are wise. And in that way, they will continue in the roles, but only if they ask for help and humble themselves. So, of course, the next generation will be different to the one that has been. They'll see beyond the surface things and have an understanding and joy in the beyond. There'll be a desire for depth and the deep things, and there'll be a joy of being, and of that. There's going to be something different with this generation that is coming now. I don't know what it is, but they're not going to be taken in with the things that we've been taken in with, the things that have taken us. There's going to be a desire for something more in them. And of course, these are only words and only thoughts that I am having, but I believe that we're going to see the fruit of that. I believe it. Of course, the slaughter of innocents will continue, but there will be a great contention, and it will not end well for those who continue to take innocent life. And believe me, the church has been silent about the abortions that continue to happen, the lives that continue to be taken. We have been silent, but we are going to hear again in the days to come a voice that is going to be loud and clear. It's going to happen again, and it's time. And this, of course, is what James talks about in chapter 5 and verse 1 to 6. It says this: "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire." You see who's witnessing against them? It's not God. God doesn't have to judge them. They already judge themselves by their own words and by their own behaviour, as do we all. That's how it is. He says, your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be witness against you, because they've hoarded and they've been greedy, and that's going to witness against them. "And will eat up your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Indeed, the wages of the labourers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. And the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury, and you have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just, and he does not resist you. If there was ever a verse and a chapter for this moment, this present time, that's it, and we are going to see it. And if there was ever a time to pray and get down on hands and knees and humble ourselves before God, it's this time right now. If this time has not done that to you yet, then goodness knows what it will take to cause us as the church to get down by the side of our bed and humble our hearts before God. Huh? But there is also a day of the latter rain, which is coming. And James goes on and says, therefore be patient, because the rain's coming, and the days of the latter rain are coming as well, and there's going to be a great harvest. And we are running to Jezreel to sow into that harvest. Now meet me again in just a few moments for the third instalment.